Hey, Malcolm, you know that Audible's got a lot more than audiobooks?
Of course, podcasts,
Originals,
bestsellers,
future bestsellers,
sleep stories.
sleep story. What are you talking about, sleep story? Malcolm. Oh, wow. Malcolm. Malcolm. Hey, no, Roxy. Hey, Roxy, get out of Malcolm's house.
The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories, all in one place. Audible.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Braxton, Los Angeles Times staff writer. I cover television for the calendar section. Thank you all for tuning in to the 26th Annual Festival of Books and our virtual event today with author Don Lemon, who has just written This is the Fire, What I Say to My Friends About Racism. America's only Black primetime anchor, Don Lemon brings an urgent, deeply personal, and riveting plea, illustrating how deep our problems lie and providing a roadmap to how we can begin to fix our problems. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone to support your local independent bookstore during our festival. A limited supply of signed book plates by Don will be available at Pages, a bookstore. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Don Lemon. Don, so great to see you. Welcome.
Hi, Greg. Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I'm very impressed by your bookshelf as well behind you. It's very nice.
all my little trinkets and movies and things, huh?
Very
Thanks so much. This is a big thrill for me because so many of us welcome you into our living room every day for comfort, for information, for guidance, for understanding, and we feel like we know you, and yet reading this book, we realize that, there's a whole lot more. It's such a deep dive into you as a person, your emotion, what you've been through, what has made you the person that you are. So it's an experience and a revelation. I want to really just congratulate you on that. You must be gratified by the response to the book.
I am gratified by the response. And Greg, I wasn't sure that there was going to be an appetite for this subject. I thought that there might be initially following George Floyd, but it was something that I had to get out. I had to write it. I had to put it down on paper, so to speak. Even though it's everyone's doing it in the computer now. Very few people are writing on paper, and if they are, then God bless them. But I was concerned that as the months and the time as the time waned after the George Floyd killing, that the interest might wane in it as well. And guess what? It did not. And I think everything that I write about in the book, almost every single thing, is playing out right now in real time, whether it's a courtroom in Minneapolis or a street in Minneapolis or any street across the United States of America.
So before we get into the specifics of the book, I want to address what you just said, because at any second now, you could receive a bulletin that a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial is in.
Right.
As you've said before, this is not just about Derek Chauvin. This is not just about George Floyd. America is on trial, you said. So I just want to know how you are feeling at this moment and what your expectations are and how you're preparing for what could happen at any second.
I'm feeling anxious. I think most people across the country are feeling anxious. And honestly, Greg, there's a bit of dread with that because we don't know what's going to come. And depending on which way the verdict goes, there could be unrest, or there could be unrest regardless of how the verdict is. So I'm feeling anxious because I'm going to be one of the people at the forefront of giving America the news and helping them synthesize it and try to figure out exactly what to do with it. So there's a bit of anxiety. There is, obviously I've gone through this before, having covered a number of trials, but for some reason, this one has garnered the attention of the world in a way that others similar to this has not. And so, I'm a little bit anxious. I'm a little bit concerned about the future of America, but I'm also optimistic that regardless of what comes, I should say hopeful, not optimistic, that whatever comes of this, that we will ultimately do the best with it that we can to help us move forward to what we call a more perfect union, not a perfect union, but a more perfect union, which is guaranteed supposedly in our Constitution, or at least something that we should be striving for in our Constitution.
We're going to be counting on you to deliver information, but also you're going to have your own reaction, personal reaction to this as a Black man, as a person in America. So how do you walk that line between giving us the information and just staying in, the middle of what needs to be projected, and then your own reaction to whatever happens?
Well, first and foremost, it's my job. I'm a professional. So I can, as far as, walking that line, or as you call, I think you said a fine line. I'm paraphrasing. I don't want to misquote you. So first and foremost, I'm a professional. I've reported on 9/11. I've reported on the death of Osama bin Laden. I've reported on inaugurations of presidents. And many, many things in between. So professionally, I am equipped to do it. But also in this moment, I think that I'm uniquely qualified to do what I'm doing because of my experiences, my lived experiences as a Black man in America. And so I'm not sure if it's walking a line. I think I'm just there to be honest with the viewer, to give the information as it is factually. And then if there's any analysis to be done, I think I am free and should give that analysis with my perspective and from my point of view. I think that is legitimate, and I think it's expected, and I think that's what America needs right now.
I was watching you last night when you were talking about the comments made by Maxine Waters, and I think a lot of us are feeling tension at the moment, and that seemed to add another log to the fire. Can you just kind of briefly address what your reaction was to what she said? Because I know you said words, our leaders' words matter. Did you feel that this could, have an impact on whatever happens?
Well, I think our leaders' words do matter. I don't think, and I know that people are trying to portray it that way. I don't think that Maxine Waters meant violence in the sense of rioting and looting and starting any kind of physical violence. Now, she's explained when she says what confrontation to her means, and I'll accept her explanation for that. I'm not here to tell Maxine Waters, who is a seasoned lawmaker, what to do, but I was trying to give some context to it, and that there is nuance. There should be nuance, but I say there's no nuance anymore because everything is either black or white, right? It's from one extreme to the other. I understand Maxine Waters' anger. I understand the frustration that she has, especially as a person of color, as a woman of color who came out of the civil rights movement, who had to fight for everything that she has and has faced discrimination beyond anything I think that most people can understand or have experienced themselves. That said, in this very volatile time, especially what happened at the Capitol on January 6th, I don't think that Maxine Waters should be giving anyone any sort of fuel or ammunition to turn it into something that she didn't want it to be, or that we don't want it to be, meaning America. I think that people should be responsible for their words in the moment, and they should be strategic. And Maxine Waters' comments were not constructive or helpful in this moment.
So once again, this is the fire. It's speaking to what really is at the center of our nation at this time. The title is a direct reference to James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. Can you just go into what your inspiration was in writing the book, and particularly at this time?
Sure. So The Fire Next Time was the book that had the most influence on me when it comes to race in America, and also sexuality, especially the intersection between race and sexuality, as James Baldwin was a gay Black man from America. So am I. So we have that similarity in common. It is a book that has had the most influence on me when it comes to race. And so during the George Floyd summer, I call it the summer of unrest, the summer of 2020, I had to get this book out. Many people had asked me to write a book during the Trump years, and I wouldn't do it because of the president. You know, I found myself being the frequent target of the former president. I just did not want to be have that much association with an administration, especially that administration. So I chose not to write a book. But after very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville, after Ahmaud Arbery was gunned down on a Georgia street while jogging, after Breonna Taylor was shot in her bed, and then George Floyd the life was snuffed out of him on a city street right in front of our very eyes. I felt that I had to do something beyond the 2 hours of analyzing and reporting the news every night, that I needed to do something that would be more lasting than just a news report or live news, breaking news report that would go away the moment, in many instances, that it happened. So we were in the middle of quarantine. I could not see my family. I was stuck in the house and stuck to my job reporting, many hours a day. So I decided that I was not very thrilled with the world that I was leaving for my great nephews, and the world that they were about to inherit. And one of my nephews is around the same age that James Baldwin's nephew was when he wrote The Fire Next Time and dedicated the prologue of the book to his nephew, on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. So I sat down to write a letter to my great nephew because I wanted to get it out, and I wanted him to know that I wished him a better future and a better world than I had left for him, and that I hoped that he was able to embrace his beauty and his blackness with an ease that I was not able to do. And so after I wrote that letter, the book poured out. It just sort of came out of me in a matter of a couple of months. And from maybe August or September to November was the heavy writing of the book. And as you know, that is, some quick time to write a book.
Whenever I write about race and racial issues in entertainment, it always takes kind of a physical toll on me because I want to get it right and want to just express things the right way, and it's physically, taxing. Is it that way for you when you're getting into these subjects?
Absolutely. And it. I mean, it takes a toll on you. And I found myself experiencing stress in ways that I had not before. There were parts of my body that ached that I didn't even know existed. There were sleepless nights and there were days where I didn't want to get out of bed. But at every turn, and there were complications and things that I thought were hindrances that actually turned out to be helpful in the writing and construction of this book, like having to work till midnight every night and having a longer commute because of COVID, because I didn't get to work from my home like many people did. And I had to sometimes stay hours longer at work than other people did. But what that did was it gave me a structure and a discipline and a mechanism to write the book that I would not have had otherwise. I could have sat around and said, oh, there's a deadline, I'll get to it. But because of being in the car for, an hour longer every night or whatever it was, it gave me time to really sort of stew in my thoughts and at the same time get them out. And before I knew it, because of that extra time, I had all of this material that eventually transformed into a book. So yeah, it was physically exhausting. I would say that I think I aged probably about 10 years in a matter of months, but I wouldn't take any of it back because I think this is an important book and I think it's going to resonate for quite a long time. I really do.
The letter to your nephew is just so raw, it's so personal, and you just can tell just how deep this whole situation was, especially after reacting to George Floyd. What was your nephew's reaction to the letter?
Well, he's 13. So he's like, oh, okay, wow, that's pretty cool, Uncle Don. And that's it. I mean, and I haven't really had the opportunity to sit down with him and really talk about it. I can tell you that his mother and his stepdad are both just over the moon, and they were so moved by the entire book, but especially that, because it's something that he'll have for the rest of his life. And it's something that he'll be able to capitalize on if he wishes to, as in the form of if he wants to be a writer, if he wants to take the opportunity to talk about social issues, especially issues when it comes to race. I am very happy that I have given him somewhat of an entree or a platform that he will be able to do that. Most people don't have that. And so I think that's part of his inheritance from me, and it will be part of his legacy if he chooses for that to be. And if he doesn't, then he doesn't have to. But he's a 13-year-old kid, and the reason that I chose to do it the way I did, write him a letter, was because if you pick up the phone and call a 13-year-old kid or try to FaceTime with him, what you'll get is someone who is trying to continue his Fortnite on the computer or whatever computer game that he's playing. And, and you say, "Oh, I love you so much, Trushad. You are, the apple of my eye." He'll be like, "Uncle Don, ew, that's weird." And so I'm going to wait till he gets a little bit older, I think, to have a proper discussion with him. But I think he'll appreciate what it is once he matures a little bit. He's a 13-year-old boy.
The subtitle of the book is What I Say to My Friends About Racism. In the last 4 years, or even the last year or so, or while you were writing the book, how have your conversations with friends changed about racism? And are there conversations where you find that your friends just don't get it, or you have to kind of give up trying to communicate just how important this issue is?
Well, yes, and yes. So my conversations with my friends have that was part of actually the inspiration for the book, was because people were calling me, especially my white friends, were calling me during the summer of unrest, when the protests were going on, when they watched that video of George Floyd over and over and over. What do I do? I don't want my kids to grow up in a world like this. I feel like I haven't understood some of the things that you go through, Don, and some of my friends of color. Help me to understand that. I know that's a lot to ask of you. What should I do? I don't have the vocabulary to talk to my kids. I don't have the tools to be able to what, how. And that was part of the reason I wrote it. And that's why I subtitled it, What I Say to My Friends About Racism. Because I talk to my friends about racism. While I don't castigate them, I offer them grace. I don't let them off the hook either. They have to be held accountable for their own actions, and they have to, at the end of the day, do the work themselves. So this book is a frank discussion about the conversations that I have with my friends. And those initial conversations were easier because people were more open and they were vulnerable, because we were all sort of going through the same thing during quarantine. And we were all very vulnerable. We didn't know what the next day was going to be like. As that got easier, so to speak, and we started dealing with the pandemic in learned ways, when we got more experience with it, people started to back off a little bit, and we didn't have as many conversations. But now I find that with the verdict coming up and with these issues continuing to be in the news at the forefront, people are becoming more willing to have them again. So what I do is I tell them to buy the book. And I have found through my own book that it has eased the conversations, and it has made it easier, I should say, for people to be able to start these conversations. I went to a double vaxxed dinner party the other night with 8 of my friends, and I gave all of them a book. And we had the most frank discussions about race over the dinner table that I have had with anyone in years, if ever, with that many people and with that mixed a crowd, with that many different ethnicities in the room. So my conversations have, frankly, since the book has come out, have become easier because the book offers people the tools to be able to talk about it. And because you have a book there that's about race, you can say, well, your book is about race, or this book is about race, even if it's not me. This book is about race, and the book says this, and the book talks about this, and then you can begin to talk about it.
I was struck by so many passages in your book, and I just wanted to reference one where you say, white brothers and sisters, pocket that I'm not racist card. I don't want to hear about your black girlfriend in college or your black postman to whom you give fruitcake to every Christmas,
Lit
or
teacher, right?
lit teacher who totally like rocked your world. It doesn't matter if you're racist or not racist or anti-racist. Our society is racist.
Yeah, that's true.
It just packs such a punch.
Because it's true. Because I think it's easier for people to understand this way, especially for the women and the moms who are out there. Women face issues in this society that we, entitled and privileged men don't have to face. We don't have to think about it. It doesn't exist to us. The sexism and the misogyny that women face. So if there is a woman who can educate me on a subject, then I want to hear about it. And I'm not going to, walk around all day saying, well, women are, okay, I'm going to listen. And there may be some truth to what they say, or maybe there's not, but I'm going to be open. And so it doesn't matter if I am not a sexist, particularly in general. What matters is that I am open to listening to my fellow women citizens, my fellow women countrymen, about the issues that they face and how I, as a man in this society, and as someone who is along with this journey with them, can help them with that. And I think we should have the same attitude when it comes to race. I find it harder for people to be able to do that because I think we've never been able to deal with race in a substantial way because we don't want to have to face up to the fact that much of what we learned, much of what we know, the history that we have been raised on and reared on, and that has been hammered into us, is a lot of it's wrong, and we've been operating on a lie. And so I think that's tough for people to sort of come to a realization about something that they have believed for a long time and then find out that it's not real and then have to relearn and be reprogrammed. And so, pocket that, because all you're telling me is that you don't want to hear, I think I said, I'm harshing your eye. I don't want to hear, what you're saying is that I don't want to hear about racism. I'd rather hear about something else. I'm okay with it is basically what you're saying.
How basically do you deal with this resistance? Because part of the difficulty of all that's going on in this country is that we have to live every day, not only as people of culture, just getting through every day is a struggle. But then when you encounter this other element that has a total resistance to listening, that doesn't want to hear what you have to say or hear your story or hear your pain, that just makes everything so much difficult. So you have the energy of being an everyday person and then fighting this other energy trying to make other people understand is just draining.
So what's your question? How often do I have to, you said, how often do I have to deal with this?
How do you deal with that resistance? Because the people who are interested in your book are right with you. But what do you say to people who are just going to keep fighting you and saying, I don't want to hear it, or you're wrong?
Well, I think you have to deal with them with honesty. That's the only way that you have to deal with them. And listen, I can't be responsible for people who don't want to hear the truth. I'm not responsible for educating the world. And I even say in the book, I don't know the answers to everything. And if anyone tells you that they do know the answer to everything, run the other way, because they don't. But what I do know is my experience as a man of color in this country who is of a certain age and who has been around long enough and has seen enough to be able to speak with authority. And if you would care to hear some wisdom from me or get some ideas about what I think can make it better or what I think can help change things, then you're free to do that. If you're not, that's not my business. But what I'm going to do is speak to you with truth and with knowledge and with facts. I know that we live in a post-factual society right now. We live in a post-truth world. And we have to, we've got to figure out how to rectify that. We've got to change that. We've got to go back to truth, and we have to go back to facts, and we have to go back to reality. And so I think this book does that. And so what I do is in my everyday life, I try to point out the realities of the world, and I try to debunk misinformation, and I try to give people the truth about history. And so, as I do in this book. And so that is the only thing that I can do. I am doing everything that I think that I can do in the moment. I do it on television, which is broadcast all over the world, and I give people the truth. If you're resistant to it, then that is your issue. I do it in print. I've done it in a book where I give you the truth and the reality of the world. If you're resistant to that, that's not my issue. I do it in my podcast, which is over the radio waves, so to speak, in the old, speaking in the old school vernacular. And if you are resistant to the truth and the facts about that, then that's not my issue. But I'm doing everything that I can. I don't think that I can save everyone, but I do hear from people, Greg, a lot of people saying, I don't always agree with you, but I'm going to read your book and see. And so I do believe that this book can help you understand other people's perspectives and points of view. And I do believe that it can change your mind on certain issues. And if it doesn't change your mind, it can at least open you up to the possibility that other people think and live and have experiences that aren't necessarily yours. And I do believe that it is a unifier, a unifying book, and not a divisive book. Too much division right now. This is a unifier.
How much attention do you pay to that opposition? How much do you monitor Fox News or read publications, conservative right-wing publications?
So I have to pay attention to it in a sense because I am on television. I am a journalist, and I have to know what other people are doing. While I used to watch a lot more of Fox News. I can't watch it as much anymore because it's what they do. Much of it is not tethered to truth or reality, and is sort of hyperbolic echo chamber on steroids. It has become that, and it not that it was that much better before, but at least it was somewhat palatable. It's not anymore. But I listen to as much of it or watch as much of it as I can before I have to change the channel because there's just too much to debunk, right? I obviously I read some of the right-wing blogs because they just happen to show up on my timeline. It's not just because of that, but it's unavoidable because they show up in my timeline, or people are reacting to what I do on social media and out in the blogs because some right-wing blog or publication or columnist has written something about it. And so I see it. There's no George Will that I read every day like I used to. There is no, right-wing person that I read or pay attention to like I used to, because there were some that I respected. I just don't see that anymore. So yeah, I do pay attention to it, but not enough. I don't give a platform to it.
You talk about some really deeply personal experiences in the book. The death.
And by the way, I was trying to think of a name, and I was trying to think of Buckley, and I couldn't in the moment because I had a senior moment. But I used to pay attention to Buckley. I used to read George Will a lot. George Will is actually one of the better ones now. But the newer fringe, more extreme right wing, I just don't think it's worth giving a platform or paying attention to, because it's so toxic and so just beyond reality.
And on the other end of that, you have people who now are resistant, and they're talking about cancel culture. If the whole stigma of cancel culture, gee, you're not accepting what I say, so you're canceling me. But so many of these people were behind a president who tried to cancel the results of an election. So the hypocrisy of all of this is it's just always with us. How
what?
How do you process that, or how, just looking at the whole hypocrisy of the whole cancel culture label?
Well, not even trying to cancel an election, trying to cancel the votes of millions of Americans. Most of those Americans were people of color in Black people who lived in urban centers, who lived in Pennsylvania or Detroit, and or Michigan, or Georgia. And so I don't like and by the way, tried to cancel many different companies who didn't agree with their very toxic and dangerous and lying rhetoric. So I don't like catchphrases like cancel culture, because I think it tends to want to put things in boxes that aren't necessarily meant to be put in boxes. And it gives people the opportunity to categorize things that don't deserve to be categorized in that way. So how do I deal with cancel culture? I tell the truth about it in everything that I do. I just tell the truth about the cancel culture, or what people call cancel culture. It's not necessarily cancel culture. Conservatives aren't being canceled. So conservatives aren't being censored. Conservatives aren't being silenced. They have many different television and radio and other outlets and networks where they can go and tell their stories, and where they can talk about being canceled and being silenced as they're talking, and be broadcast as they're talking about it. So I think it's just rhetoric, and it's a tactic that's used to mislead people. And so I try not to give it a platform unless it's really egregious.
I was getting ready to talk about some of the really deeply personal experiences in your book that you reference, and in detailing what kind of person that you are, how the death of your sister impacted you, going back to Africa to see the birthplace of some of your ancestors who were sold into slavery. These are really deep, penetrating experiences that you had. How challenging was it to actually go back and write about them and put them in your book?
It was very challenging to write about them and put them in my book, because it was so deeply personal to me. And as you know, as a person of color, as you said, it's tough to live through certain things just as a person of color in this country. And I write about in the book that you're always that people of color are always living in like a race, ready, set, go. We're always living in the set moment. But I do have to say, Greg, at this moment, speaking of that experience, I'm going to have to go because the jury has reached a verdict, and I need to get to CNN to report it. So
okay,
I'm going to have to go. I'm really sorry about everyone. If we can make this up to you somehow, I will. But this is real stuff. It's breaking news, and I've got to be in the anchor chair in less than 20 minutes.
Thank you so much, Don. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So here we go, everyone. I'm so sorry that I had to leave. As you know, I am an anchor at CNN. And so a very big verdict had come down, which was in the Derek Chauvin trial. So I had to leave right in the middle of my talk with Greg. So my apologies to Greg and to the audience and to all who are interested. But I just want to read, take the time to read a couple of pieces from the book about my journey. And I'm going to give you some context to that. The first one is about my journey to Africa, part of my journey to Africa with my mom, where I traced my roots with the help of Ancestry.com. And then we went to a slave castle at Cape Coast Castle off the coast of Ghana. And I'm not going to give it all away, but I think it's enough so that you can be interested in reading the book, and you'll have to read it to find out what happened. And then the second one, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, was about something that happened to me during the course of the summer, during the pandemic, as we were on quarantine and they were sort of lifting some of the restrictions. And I had this encounter at a shop where I was buying things for my kitchen. And the interesting thing is that I was going to leave it out of the book because I thought it was, that it might not resonate. But it's one of the pieces, one of the parts of the book that actually resonates a lot with people. Okay, so let's start with Africa. And I go on, I start to talk about, ancestry and And I relate Louisiana and what happens with Louisiana in the States with monuments and so on. But then we go into a deeper thing about the biggest monument of all was that I thought was the Cape Coast Castle. Okay, so I say, my mom and I are in Africa now. And I said, we were watching, we had gone to Cape Coast Castle and there were all these kids who were playing out in the surf as we were filming our segment for CNN and Ancestry.com. And it was all these children who were just playing out, not a care in the world. Some were naked, some were in shorts, some were in bathing suits, and they were just frolicking in the sea. And it was just amazing to us. So I say, watching the children scuffle and romp in the waves on the coast of Africa, I wondered aloud, what it would be like to grow up without the undermining soundtrack in your head. And that undermining soundtrack in my head was about what happens in America, what we have to deal with in America. What would it be like to grow up without air conditioning? Mom countered. The heat was palpable in the flagstone courtyard at Cape Coast Castle, where we met our tour guide, Esso. The castle itself stands impervious to the passage of time, gleaming white on a high curtain of rock that shears up from the cobalt blue ocean. On the ramparts, an imposing row of iron cannons juts out, aimed at the open water. Two tall bastions flank the iron sea gate. Inside the upper stories once housed luxurious accommodations, offices, and kitchens. Below are the dungeons, one for males, another for females, connected by a network of dank, tomb-like tunnels. The entrance is like the mouth of some medieval hell. Descending into it, I felt cold sweat trickle down my spine. Leading us through the catacombs, Esso pointed out the gully in the floor that vented feces and urine of up to 1,000 people at a time for an average of 3 months. This was a dungeon for the troublemakers, he said, those who were instigating violence. They were held here in chains, so you see the holes in the wall. I didn't want to think about what it would mean to spend months shackled there in utter darkness. I kept looking for any crevice for light to come in, any crawl space through which one might escape, but there was none. A person would die here or be dragged out to die on a slave ship, or at best to die in slavery. Esso led us through another narrow passage to a wooden door. He pointed out a sign above it, door of no return. What you are standing before now is a shrine, said Esso. Through this door, they left behind the known for the unknown. Behind this wall, there was a tunnel through which the captives were led to the exits. To get to the ships, Mom said? Yes, to get to the boats and into the ships, said Esso. Now the walls are dedicated to the souls of our ancestors. We lit a candle for the memory of our forefather, and all the spirits who remain within these walls. In the light of a small bright flame, I saw tears on my mother's face. I pulled her into my arms and kissed the top of her head. We're survivors, I said. Esso pushed the door open, and we passed through it into blinding sunlight. It was almost unbearable in the contrast to the overwhelming gloom. On the other side of the door was another sign, door of return. On behalf of the government and the people of this country, said Esso, it is my pleasure to welcome you back. When Barack Obama and his family passed through the same doorway in 2009, he said the castle reminded him of Buchenwald. He noted the ironic presence of a church directly over the troublemakers' dungeon, a reminder of how comfortably good and evil are able to coexist in the minds of piously complicit bystanders. Obama said, I think it was particularly important for Malia and Sasha, who are growing up in such a blessed way, to be reminded that history can take very cruel turns. And hopefully one of these things that was imparted to them during this trip is their sense of obligation to fight oppression and cruelty wherever it appears, and that any group of people who are degrading another group of people have to be fought against with whatever tools we have available to us. What tools? The man said. Once it was hammers and cane knives, now it's voices and votes. So I really want to read this next part because it tells you about how my mom felt, and I think it's a really profound observation by her that I write about. So I say, Mom was quiet on the long drive back to our hotel in the city. I'd been to Africa before, but she didn't know what to expect. The topography was beautiful, the water, the hills,
but she wasn't prepared for the level of poverty she saw. I squeezed her hand and said, "You okay, Mom?" She nodded, but I could see she was blinking back tears. "I could not have made this trip without you," I told her. "I'm so glad I got to share this with you. You've shown me so much of the world," she said, "taken me places I never imagined going. I've had experiences I never thought I'd have. You did that for me. I'm just so proud of you." I told her how grateful I was for everything she'd given me and how glad I was to share all of it with her, the good times and the difficult. Now we were both crying, hugging it out. It meant a lot to me. There was a time when I was afraid she would be disappointed in me, maybe even disown me if she knew the truth about who I am, her gay son. I was humbled by the idea that my mere presence would be a source of heartache for her. I could not have been more mistaken. When I finally opened up to her, came out and owned it all, she was there for me with nothing but love, acceptance, and respect. Mom and I were emotionally and physically exhausted by the time we got back to our hotel, still jet lagged and longing for sleep, yet we didn't want the day to end. "Let's go have a drink," I said, and she was all for it. We found a spot overlooking the ocean and shared a bottle of wine as dusk disappeared and stars emerged in the night sky. "I have to confess something," said Mom. "I'm glad we came here, but I'm glad I don't live here. I don't know how to make sense of it. The way our family was taken from this place, it's wrong. It's ugly. I don't know. There aren't words to describe what that is. Our people left here in the worst possible conditions, through the dungeon and the darkness, put on that ship. But we flew here, first class. It was awesome. And we brought part of them back with us. What a statement that is about who we've become. What a testament to the power of God." And then the book goes on to talk more about that and about the next thing says, people, let's take a moment to unpack that profound observation. So you'll have to read the rest to figure out that observation. So now I want to talk about what happened in Sag Harbor. So I'm talking about Sag Harbor, and I said that the shops were they were opening up snails with tentacles, and one by one they started to open in Sag Harbor. And so I'm out and I'm like happy to sort of be out wearing a mask. Some people don't want to wear a mask. It's not as liberal as you might think. There are lots of conservatives and Trump supporters, and some didn't want to wear masks. I call them Fauciites, and some are not. So I said, businesses continue to reopen in the Pleasant Shopping District in Sag Harbor, a region redolent with privilege. Out for a morning walk, I stopped by a new boutique selling upscale kitchenware. Cliche as it might be, when life gives you lemons, as it does via potted Meyer lemon trees outside of our kitchen door, I make lemonade in my 1960s Sunbeam blender. Citric acid stains a marble countertop, so I appreciate good cutting boards. This little shop had an amazing variety, including the enormous pizza peels you use in an outdoor stone oven. "That's some cutting board," I remarked, and the clerk glanced up. I smiled behind my mask, wanting to assume that he was smiling too. It's hard to read people these days. "Sorry, sir," he said, "we're not allowing shoppers inside yet." "Oh, no problem. I wasn't sure of the rules. I mean, I can sell you the cutting board, he glanced toward the door, "Sure, I understand." Passing the shop again on my way home, I stopped at the doorway to buy 2 expensive cutting boards. While the clerk rang up the purchase, I noticed a white woman inside shopping. "What's up with that?" I asked, nodding in the direction of the woman who browsed, a bulky tote dangling on her arm. The clerk tried to tell me that the woman was training, right? And I say that in quotes, but that's not how it looked. I left with the cutting boards, which now felt 10 times heavier and a lot less pretty. The remainder of my fresh morning energy was consumed with back and forth with Tim, with friends, and inside my own head, over motives, optics, gaslighting, hypersensitivity, and all the possible ways you could deconstruct this incident from various points of view. Because this is what happens when you're shopping while Black, driving while Black, crossing the street while Black, breathing while Black. A white person reacts in a certain way, or did they? No, they rush to assure you, you misunderstood. If you express skepticism, like maybe it isn't really store policy to follow customers up and down the aisles. You're chided for being oversensitive. Don't make it about race, we're told, because racism is so 20th century. This sort of gaslighting is exhausting and wears especially thin whenever a Black person is murdered by police, wrongfully imprisoned, or needlessly hassled in a city park. If there's no video, we can pretend it didn't happen, of course, but occasionally viral photo documentation will trigger momentary outrage. Immediately, a steam valve opens, venting aggregate pressure. Plausible explanations are offered. Well, you can't see what happened just before the bystander started filming. Past wrongs are deconstructed. His girlfriend called the police on him, one time 6 years ago. Fatigue blunts the resolve of Black protesters and the fair-weathered support of faux compatriots. Can we all just get along? Hashtags pass in the course of a news cycle or two, and Black shoppers, drivers, pedestrians, and parents return to the unsettled conditions of wired watchfulness we all grew up with and consider normal. Think of yourself as a sprinter about to run a race. Ready? You breathe, practiced, and confident, feet on the blocks. Set? You rise up, chest tight, every muscle flushed with acetylchlorine, every neuron firing. Wait for it, here it comes, it's right there. That hovering edge of hypertension just before the crack of the starting pistol, a perpetual state of set. That is where I, as a Black man, spend most of my waking hours, and having white people deny that this dynamic exists only serves to pour another tablespoon of fight or flight acid into my stomach. No one longs for the bad old days of segregation, but at least there was no pretense about it. And so to hear how that story ends at that little shop in Sag Harbor, and there is a resolution to it, you have to read this book. So I write about how Black people, especially Black men, but most Black people, live in a perpetual state of set. Ready, set. And then you wait for whatever happens after that. And even if it isn't what you think it is, the reality is that we have to live with that possibility and that question all the time, as not only as people of color in this country, but all Americans, because we all share in this conundrum. So I hope you enjoyed a few passages from my book, and I hope you buy it.
Thank you to Don for spending this time with us. I want to remind everyone that you can go to Page's bookstore to check out a limited number of signed nameplates that Don has made available for us for his book, This Is the Fire. Thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you all soon.